everyone. Welcome to the Automation Insights. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're based. Today, we're going to be looking at automation insights, enhance your workforce, and improve labor processes. My name is April. I'll be your host for the next few hours. Before we jump into today's sessions, I wanted to just draw your attention to a few key housekeeping items. Please remember, you can submit questions to all our speakers today using the chat function on the right or the Q&A bottom, which is at the bottom of your screen. You can also share your thoughts on the content and interact with your fellow attendees via the chat. For any technical issues, please try rejoining the sessions. And if that doesn't work, please go to the help desk on the event platform. Now, with all of that out of the way, I'm delighted to welcome Alberto Jimenez, VP of Product Management for IBM Business Automation, who will be presenting Do More with Less, how AI-powered automation can address today's labor shortages. So Alberto, if I can ask you to turn your camera on and take yourself on mute, and please take it away.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alberto Jimenez, and I lead the IBM Business Automation Software Unit. Today, what I plan to do today is to spend some time discussing the implications, I would say the profound implications of labor shortages in the global economy. And to do that, I'll provide some historical context, and then I will discuss how we can use technology to address some of these challenges. And I will specifically focus on the knowledge economy, on the knowledge workers and the shortages there. My personal perspective is that these challenges that we are living through today can be significantly reduced by automation technology, and specifically AI software. So let's go to the next chart, please. So before I get into the content, let me try to frame the discussion. Thank you. As I was preparing for this presentation, I read an article that argued that while inflation and supply chain disruptions are often mentioned by the media as the major challenges for the global economy today, the root cause of both of these are actually skill shortages. In the words of the articles, to actually say what he read in the article, skill shortages were devastating industries around the world. In the last decade, talent shortages have increased fivefold. And as of 2021, 69% of US employers reported challenges filling out positions, and that is up from just 14% in 2010. So this is real, the acceleration of the issue. The top shortages reported by these employers were for back office functions like IT, accounting, finance and operations, and customer support professionals. In other words, knowledge workers, the people that work with documents, the people that get input via documents, that process data, and again, not necessarily the challenges with physical work. That is another challenge, but we're focusing on the knowledge workers today. The problem, if we take a step back, the problem with this picture, with this situation, is that skilled labor shortages are created by long-term demographic trends, and those have never been successfully corrected in advanced economies in short periods of time. You need decades to fix that trajectory. So net, I think it is important that we come to terms with the fact that there are no longer enough skills to support the normal economic activity required by a knowledge-based economy like the one the US has had since the mid-90s. Let's go to the next one, please. So before I get into the numbers of this chart, let me share with you my two favorite examples of automation in history. And of course there are many, but the first, I guess, human desire for automating labor has been with us for centuries, for millennia. The first documented use of automation was a regulator for a water clock in Egypt around 300 BC. So let me tell you what that means. A group of people would take turns day and night and to pour water into a container to keep it at a very specific level, to keep the water at a very specific level, so that there was a constant flow of water to control the movement of the clock. Someone invented something called a float regulator, which is very similar to what we all have in our toilets today. And that would limit the amount of water that would go into the container. That simple invention allowed a group of people that would spend time filling out these containers, maybe 6 or 8 people that would take turns all the time, 24 hours a day, and free up their time so that they could spend that in higher value activities. So that's one. The other one that I really like is one that I learned in Carl Frey's book, The Power of in the Age of Automation. And in that one, he describes a group of 600 lamp lighters. I didn't know this term, but these were people that were employed by the city of New York in the early 1900s. These folks would go around the city with torches and ladders, and they would light up. They used to light up more than 25,000 lamps every night. But a few years later, so that was their employment. But a few years later, electric lamps were installed almost everywhere in the city. And these 600 people also moved to higher value activities. I mentioned these two examples because from where we're standing today, with what we know now, it is obvious that these were appropriate uses of technology and that humans were not required for these processes to be successful. In fact, maybe automation was superior than humans. That is not too different from what we are trying to do today with software. What is different, I would say, and now I'll get into the slide, is the speed at which this is taking place and how external factors have been accelerating that pace. This is a McKinsey chart that shows that in the last 12 months, we have seen the same amount of digitization as the previous 10 years. No one should be surprised that the global pandemic was the root cause of that acceleration. Before the pandemic, many businesses were running just fine, relying on millions and millions of hours of manual processes that worked just fine when almost everyone was physically in an office space, physically together. But obviously that didn't work in remote work environments, and it meant that many processes needed to be quickly digitized in order to continue the normal flow of operation of businesses. Obviously, the imbalance between supply and demand of labor and skills that we just discussed in the previous chart has resulted in an acute need for automation technology across regions and across industries. Let's go to the next one, please. Okay, so going forward, automation will make information-centric jobs more effective, but this time at scale. This number to the top right also comes from McKinsey, and they estimate that just in 2022, to be clear, in a 12-month period, $134 billion in labor value will be offset by software, specifically automation software that uses AI technology. But this also means that, to go to the bottom number, this also means that there is going to be a very clear performance contrast between businesses that leverage AI-powered automation and the ones that don't. Our own IBM Institute of Business Value, which is the IBM think tank, surveyed hundreds of CEOs globally at the beginning of the pandemic, and 80% of them believed that automation technology will be needed to outperform their competitors. Next page, please. So let's talk about the technology, what this means in terms of technology. This is how we in IBM categorize the areas of automation technology and how they manifest themselves in our product portfolio. Let me begin at the bottom right of the chart. The platform portfolio provides the tools to develop, run, and automate enterprise applications. Next to the left, IT automation is about automating IT processes to make sure applications and infrastructure are always on and perform effectively from a cost perspective. The integration portfolio is about, to the top left, is about connecting applications and systems together so that the rest of the automation is on this page is possible. And finally, the topic of today, the business that I lead, which is IBM Business Automation. And what we do is that we automate and augment work by reducing manual processes. The specific outcome, the specific result that of doing this successfully is a measurable increase in the revenue per employee metric that most CFOs and COOs are very much focused right now. We do this by offering a set of technologies that include robotic process automation, process mining, decision tools, workflow, and orchestration. So let me talk about those. Let's go to the next page, please. Okay, so I guess the key message of this chart is that different automation technologies are applicable to different processes and functions. We use this framework to help us identify both candidates of processes to automate, but also the tools to automate them. Let me explain what we mean. On the horizontal axis, we place the relative frequency of events that go through a process or a function. And let me share kind of an extreme example to demonstrate the range. This event can be as frequent as a repricing event of a financial instrument, which is based on a variable interest rate that changes millions of times a day in a trading floor. That's one example. Millions of events happen, repricing millions of times in a day. But on the other extreme, I guess in the low volume, it can also be a 20-minute interaction between a patient and a specialist, a doctor, which maybe happens 10 or 15 times a day. That is the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis is the uniqueness of the outcome. How deterministic is the outcome of a step? And let's use the same example to explain what we mean. The price of a financial instrument is just one, a single price. It's a direct formula that gives you a single value. There's no context, no interpretation. Let's say the price is $22.14 per unit, full stop. On the other hand, the diagnosis that the doctor provides to the patient has nothing deterministic about it. Most of the time it's not deterministic. It requires data interpretation, it requires experience and context, and then a subjective determination for a course of action. So we can talk about for hours about this chart, but let me talk about a few examples, a few of these boxes, and how we use technologies to automate them. Let me begin with repetitive work. We can use robotic process automation for deterministic high volume events like the ones that take place in this box called repetitive work at the bottom left of the graph. Moving to the lighter green box, we can use document processing technologies to automate administrative work. And I think a good example of these are compliance processes that follow government rules or regulator mandates about records management or the storage of those records. To the far right side of this plane is the darker blue box. And those are a set of department flows where most of the competitive differentiation of a company takes place. These usually are different from company to company, and workflow technology is very valuable here. And to finish off, let's talk about the darker green box at the top, what we call here expert work. This category is very, very difficult to fully automate. So we mostly use technology to augment labor to support a human expert by both improving the data available to make a decision and also by reducing the time required to get to that data. In that box, AI, artificial intelligence, and orchestration technologies are relevant for that category. Let's go to the next one, please. Okay, so let's talk about our offerings. I think the best way to characterize our Cloud Pak for business automation is to think about it as a pre-integrated platform, the place where the technologies that we just talked about in the previous chart, where they live, and they can be used like Lego blocks. What I mean by that is that each one of them can be used independently, and they will deliver specific value for a specific process. But it is important that through that, leveraging that technology, we know that they're architected to seamlessly work together so that the objectives that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation can be fully realized by building on top of each other. You can read the names of the screen, but for the folks that are familiar with our offerings and our acquisitions over the years, our Cloud Pak for business automation includes our business automation workflow, FileNet Content Manager, Operational Decisional Manager, data capture, robotic process automation, process mining, etc. Let me talk a little bit about those specifically. Let's go to the next page, please. So I think sometimes it's easier to understand the capabilities in a flow. So first, let's begin with our core automation offerings from the top left. Document processing, which is the capture category here, is the way in which we transform elements in documents. Those can be physical or electronic documents into discrete, usable pieces of data that are valuable in process flows, given the semantic categorization that we tag them with. That in coordination with content services, the next section, in this case, an example is FileNet Content Manager, we are able to manage unstructured and semi-structured documents of text, audio, or video to really understand what is contained in a document. Now, decision management capabilities are used to make decisions that otherwise would be done manually. We digest rules and policies to automate that next step in a decision flow. For example, a good example to explain this one is fraud detection. Our decision management portfolio is used by large-scale financial services clients, I mean the largest ones in the world, to analyze transactions using machine learning, algorithms, and scoring to determine if a transaction needs a second look, if a human needs to be involved. But up to that point, there haven't been any human involvement. So this is very high volume. And then workflow is about the orchestration of people and systems to sequence the events in order to improve quality and efficiency. Now, underneath these tools that I just mentioned, there are three capabilities that we use to support them end to end. And the first one is process mining, and it is what it sounds like, a set of tools to discover processes by looking into data that can be stored in, for example, event logs of enterprise applications, which obviously opens the opportunity to automate them. Robotic process automation, on the other hand, gives us the ability to actually automate repetitive tasks that don't really need a human being, and that can free up large portions of the workforce of a company so that they can perform higher value activities. And finally, operational intelligence, which is about leveraging AI to mine data repositories to identify insights and detect events that can be automated using the tools of a portfolio. Let's talk about this from a domain perspective. Let's go to the next page, please. Okay. We think there are good best practices of how companies should approach these, and different parts, like I just said, different parts of the business automation portfolio are better suited to automate processes with different attributes. However, from a functional perspective, from a functional role perspective, we believe that this closed loop cycle that you see here usually delivers successful or more successful automation projects. Because again, like I said before, they have the possibility to continue to improve and build on top of each other. It begins with the operations management leadership at the top left, which is probably looking to improve, obviously looking to improve operational efficiencies. That desire can be triggered by labor shortages, customer churn, customers leaving the company, or maybe time spent fixing operational errors, or frankly, just seeing the better margins of competitors that have adopted automation technologies. Then the actual modeling of the processes and the documentation goes to a process or a business analyst team. And process mining technologies are key for this step. It allows our clients to discover the flow, understand the throughput, and identify bottlenecks. The third step goes to the author of a flow in an IT organization, which leverages the technologies that we covered before to automate the flows, document processing, content management, all the tools that we've been talking about. Depending on the preference of the organization, the actual execution can take place in low-code applications, which are suitable to non-technical resources, or in some analysts refer to those as citizen developers, or also in high-code environments like the ones that are offered by Red Hat's Process Automation Manager, which are sometimes, the high-code environments are sometimes preferred by IT professionals. And finally, the end users, which can be front office employees or actual customers, get to experience the new automated processes. Sometimes this is completely invisible to them, and the function just works better and faster. The last thing I'll say about this chart is about operational intelligence, which is what I think closes the loop and allows organizations to continue to progress towards that metric of revenue per employee, to get to lower operational risk and ultimately outperform their competition. Let's go to the next one, please. So let me finish by connecting what we've been talking about to what's happening today in the world. At the beginning, I spoke about economic challenges, and then we talked about a set of technologies to overcome them. But this is not something that will happen in a theoretical future. As you can see on this chart, the vast majority of the most successful companies across industries have already embarked in their automation journeys. The largest banks, the largest airlines, the largest healthcare companies, the largest telcos. You can read the rest. And there are many more that don't fit in this page. But all of them have already adopted portions of this portfolio. Granted, not everyone is at the same level of maturity, but I think it is important to understand that where we are in this process and how important these technologies will be to remain competitive in the marketplace. Let's go to the next one, please. So with that, let me end here. I want to thank you for participating today. I'm looking forward to listening to the other presenters. We in IBM, we're eager to engage with you and to be your partner in your automation journey. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Alberto. That was really interesting and such a timely concept as well to hear more about. I just wanted to remind everyone that you can submit your questions either via the chat or for the Q&A. And we do have a couple that have come in, so I wanted to ask those to start. Automation can be used to handle repetitive, mundane tasks and free up the workforce to focus on higher value work. How do you consider automation a part of a company's employee retention strategy?
That's a good one. I think, so absolutely. I think there are two aspects to this. The first is the obvious one. One of the direct effects of the talent shortages and the so-called great resignation in the last couple of years is that the same workload has now been distributed among fewer employees. So in most markets where there's an imbalance of supply and demand of labor, employees are overworked, and many and they need the weekends and nights to catch up with work. Obviously, automating technology can free up employees from vast amounts of work, directly improving their work conditions. I think that's item one. Probably more interesting is the second one, which is what I think impacts the high performance employees or the retention of the high performance employees. And that is that the software can handle the mundane task, the repetitive work that consumes most of the time of back office workers. By filling the days of the employees with engaging, creative, cognitive work, employee satisfaction can significantly improve.
Great. So now the questions are coming in fast and furious to the chat. So we'll get through as many as we can. And then we also will have a meet the speaker session at the end of the day where we'll go over any we miss. So the next one that came in from the audience on the operations side, what AI CLI capabilities can we look forward to?
What AI, say that again, what AI
CLI capabilities can we look forward to?
Well, listen, I think let me kind of respond in a different way. I think we are entering a new era in automation. I think the availability of low-code application platforms, and what I mean by that are applications, automation, the creation of automation that can be driven by, kind of come up with and executed by someone who's not in the technology organization are going to accelerate this. With those, we're going to be able to first align better to business outcomes, to the business objectives, but also reduce the time to value. So I would say those are the two things that we're looking for. And I think the analysts also see that potential in those coming up.
Great. So the next one is, are you finding a lot of automation opportunity through process mining? And then clarified, meaning through the use of process mining tools?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's a nascent space. We do track the kind of the consumption, the demand for the software, and it is growing at a very healthy pace. I think it's not maybe as big as some of the other markets where we participate in business automation, but absolutely, yes, growing fast, a lot more interest from the clients, and very easy to see the return on investment on process mining projects. So absolutely, yes.
Great. So the next one actually maybe should have done prior to that one, but this attendee said they're unfamiliar with process mining and wondering if you could share an example, especially in terms of DevOps automation using AI.
Well, maybe I'll take that. You know what? One of the presentations that is coming up is specifically about process mining. So I think the expert that is coming after me is probably better. I think that's going to be responded in completely by the next presentation. So maybe we wait until that.
All right, we'll leave that one with Dave then to share more information. So going back then to the next question I have, business automation and technology as a whole has become a competitive differentiator for many industries. If a company has yet to adopt this, what do you think is the best way for them to start?
I think it is important to clearly define a holistic automation strategy and a set of objectives. What I mean by that is that while businesses can take on incremental steps, incremental projects to deploy point solutions to tackle specific processes, the ability to sequence those and to determine how to build on previous success is a lot easier if the final destination is clear. Not doing that, I think the opposite of that, not doing that and not knowing where you want to end up ultimately, may result in disconnected projects and may require a lot more work later to kind of tie them together to achieve higher levels of automation. So I would begin with a clear set of objectives for the long term.
Yeah, it's great. There's, it's such a daunting journey, I think, for so many people still, that just getting those first steps in are sometimes difficult to even know where to start. So that's some great advice. Then finally, I know you touched obviously on the pandemic in your presentation, but having seen COVID accelerating mass adoption of AI and automation for organizations for the past few years, what do you see as the next step in this acceleration?
Yeah, I would say I would go back to the same point. I think the democratization of automation authoring, of the ability to create automations via LCAP low-code application platforms, I think is the next step in that acceleration. Empowering the business user, empowering the owner of the business function to by himself, herself, go and find ways to automate places where they shouldn't be spending their time I think is going to be the next big thing in the industry.
Right. Well, thank you. Great way to kick off the sessions today. A lot to think about. And if you do have other questions for Alberto, just a reminder to join us for the Meet the Speaker session, which will be at around 2:30. And wanted to thank you again so much for joining. And next, I am pleased to welcome your colleague, Dave Keys, who is the WW Business Automation Sales Leader. He'll be joining us on the virtual stage to discuss turning insight to action. Process mining is your first step in the automation journey. So don't forget, you can also submit your questions for Dave throughout the session via the Q&A tab or the chat. And I will be back when he's done to answer some of those. Thank you so much. Welcome, Dave.
Great. Thank you. And let me just share my screen here to get going. All right, can you see me okay? Fantastic. All right, so let me first off introduce myself, right? So I'm on the IBM worldwide sales team running the process mining. We did a recent acquisition in this space of a great product and great tech company called MyVineo. We did that about a year ago, last May. We've got a very robust set of solutions. I also look after a workflow product set and a strategy on the RPA side. I've been in this space for a long time. I don't know, probably 15, 20 years now. I was looking at an old friend here, a book that I dusted off the other day, Reengineering the Corporation, that came out in I think it was like 1987. Which is when IBM launched our first workflow product, and we've been in that space aggressively ever since, both through native developments as well as through acquisitions. So let me take you through a little bit of an introduction on process mining holistically. This is not going to be a product pitch. It's going to really talk to this new space and the value that it can bring to our customers and to the industry. So let me just get started here and talk about this topic of turning insights into actions. All right, so as Alberto said, right, so we've had this real compression of this digital transformation journey, right? So 10 years in under 1 year, just a real fantastic acceleration of this business and of this industry, right? So if you were a company and you were running your business on a paper-based process, when COVID hit, you were scrambling to figure out how you can support remote workers and how you can digitize your information, right? So that's just one example. If you're a company that had a system set up for disaster recovery, where you'd be able to switch workloads over to a different location in the effect of a disaster, you took advantage of that and we're able to ship workloads to people's houses. So it's really the accumulation of a lot of investments that companies have made, and then a lot of reaction that we've done over the last couple of years. So if you combine that driving factor with this tight integration with RPA and a very strong affinity to RPA, as well as some of the workflow technologies around low tech, process orchestration, governance, we're really seeing this hyper growth space. In the process mining space, we see that market growing about 49. I've seen the numbers up to 60% annual growth, but this is pretty telling. So 627 million in 2021 to 10 billion in 2028 is projected by Fortune Business Insight report. So I think that's a very good example of some of the adoption that we're seeing in this space. We're also seeing things that are driving it. So digital transformation efforts are being delayed by misunderstood processes. So that's kind of the age-old thing. Or 70% of budgets are consumed by process discovery. Just this process discovery alone. Who has time to say, let's all sit at a blank whiteboard, or let's get those yellow stickies and let's go through this process reengineering system. So process mining has the capability for rapidly accelerating that effort. And I'll take you through a little bit of that in a moment. So a couple of things. So intelligent automation will improve business performance, right? So intelligent automation, you may hear Gartner talks about hyper automation. You may hear things like intelligent business process management. It's kind of a little bit of the same thing. I think intelligent automation injects AI into the overall strategy. So it's kind of the new wave of this entire automation stack that Alberto talked about earlier. So if 20% of those adopting process mining as a lever for business process automation will be more profitable than peers that won't. So you got IDC talking through, and I think the number is closer to 35%. So you see a big drive in profitability from those companies that take advantage of these tech. Also, 80% of those scaling intelligent automation should outperform the competition, as well as exceed faster growth in the next 3 years. So real nice proof points there. I saw this chart now, this employee productivity and satisfaction. I think this is really cool, right? So this intelligent landscape this landscape of the Great Resignation. You've heard of it, the Great Retirement. I just read about it called the Great Upgrade, where people are leaving jobs and getting better ones or more paying jobs. But leave no doubt, we're in a significant quit rates across all industries, right? So I saw last November, 4.5 million people in America quit their jobs, and up to 41% of employees plan to leave their jobs this year, according to a recent survey. So these are real numbers. I got this chart, this happiness quotient, from one of our customers. So they shared this with us. It really was talking about, as you reduce the amount of repetitive work that people are doing, their job satisfaction goes up. And this example came from an insurance company. It was a property and casualty insurance quote, and they were focused particularly on their underwriters. So this information came from this happiness quotient was derived from a set of survey questions to understand key items like job satisfaction, productivity, employee engagement, propensity to leave, and so on. So that kind of went into their definition of this happiness quotient. And so you look at an underwriter, right? And they go through a lot of training, they go through certifications, they have great experience. And then they spend 90% of their time doing administrative work, trying to find the right documentation, managing data within spreadsheets, or trying to find old, outdated data and map it to what they currently need to make a risk type of decision. By applying automation, bringing the right work to the right person at the right time, complete cases, it really takes a lot of that repetitive administration work away from them, and they're able to be more engaging in what they were hired to do. So, and that was a very good example. You also get things like, obviously they focus on higher value work, but it derives things like job satisfaction and this happiness quotient. And the skills are more valuable to the business. Things that are rubber stamped in the business are literally set up as straight through processing. So they don't need to go through that effort. If you can go through and set up a system that's well governed, that allows you to do straight through processing. Okay, so let's step back at the process, right? So what do employees view their organization and processes? So the graphic here on the left is what people are seeing in their day-to-day work, right? So you're seeing a number of activities that are disjointed from a process. You may not have visibility to the upstream activities that are happening in a process. You may not have visibility to the downstream effects. So you feel like sometimes you're a cog in the overall wheel, or you're just part of the process, right? So bringing all that information and views together, and their sources, so they have different applications that they work with to create, to do these tasks that are all part of a process. You take the data from those applications, and through process mining, you can then take it and put it into a data storage model, create this knowledge base. Now, let me peel that back just a little bit. So if you look at it from a data source perspective, you've got data logs from information systems, whether it's SAP, whether it's a homegrown system, whether it's Oracle Financials, whatever you're using in your organization, you have applications, and all you need for it is basically an event ID, activity name, and a timestamp. And so you can link together data logs from different applications and then create this model. Now, this is an example of using it from data logs. You can also do it from click streams. This is called task mining. It's a subset of process mining. So you have agents on people's desks, and you can look at the click streams on what they're doing. You can then either use it to fill in the gaps in processes, or you can compare it to the results that you're seeing from the applications themselves. So you may have a small subset of users that you're managing the click streams on versus the entire holistic view of all the data logs that you're getting. But it allows you to get visibility, fill in the gaps here, and then focus on process discovery. So that allows you to then capture the process. A lot of organizations I work with, they say, boy, the people that wrote those apps, the processes that we follow are not documented, or the documentation is not current. I need the big red easy button to do process discovery. And as I mentioned earlier, you can spend 70% of your time and budgets just doing process discovery. So this is a data-driven approach to doing process mining, process discovery. You get some great advantages of it. So then it allows you to do things like analytics, simulation, digital twin. Digital twin, what's that? So create a digital replica of your business so that you can then do some what if analysis, et cetera. And then you can improve your processes and really create your digital transformation roadmap. So at IBM, we look at process mining not just as a problem finder, which is traditionally where process mining has been, but really as an automation accelerator. The ability to take and use that process and the capabilities within it so that you can do what if analysis, simulation, and improvement. So let's take a look at what this digital twin is, because the digital twin concept is super important. So you need really three key elements to that. So you need to be able to do things like process discovery, the task mining, and the business rules mining is important, right? So it's not just being able to look at the little transition boxes and say, what's the Boolean algorithm within that, but look at the holistic process and say, which part of that is defined as the rule, right? If you look in your organization at your most complex approval process, it's much more complex than a Boolean rule within a decision tree. It is a process in and of itself, right? So that's business rules mining. And then also have this ability to do multi-level process mining. So you have resources that are involved in multiple processes, right? So you need to be able to look at those resources and also look at processes holistically. Let's take a look at an example. So procurement. So you can create a requisition that will result in one or more POs, that will result in one or more orders, and then you have receiving, and then you have to go and pay those, and then you have to deduct the budget from the initial requisition. So you can see there's several different elements that come together. You may then have parallelism with the different parts that are in the PO, and maybe the different vendors that are providing it to you, and then it comes back together. But at the end of the day, it was one requisition. And you want to look at it holistically as a single requisition and not breaking it up into all those different threads, because you share things like resources and you want to look at it holistically, because at the end of the day, it may be an important part of a overall or bigger process within, for example, procure to pay or your entire ERP. So multi-level process mining allows you to look at all of those processes together as one holistically, overlying the resources that are involved in them. So that's part on the discovery side. The other piece on the digital twin is this idea of monitoring and KPI compliance, looking at saying, okay, I know what my processes are, and that's exactly how it should be, but people don't always follow processes and rules. Sometimes there's shortcuts. Sometimes people do things a little bit differently. They go through and they do acquisitions of products that don't follow the process that's pre-approved. And so you may have some compliance issues. It's great opportunities for automation. You can look at root cause analysis, and you can do things like prioritize your automation or your process improvement initiatives. And then last is this optimizing, and this is where it gets really exciting. So we spent a lot of time just talking about the as-is model. On the 2B, you want to be able to run some what-if scenarios, do some simulation on those, look and prioritize where you want to spend your time and money on things like automations or process improvement, and then calculate the ROI of an investment in automation, for example, before you even start. So super powerful to be able to do that. Okay. What are types of, be able to discover the insights, test remediations, and then monitor compliance? So examples would be things like automating high frequency, inefficient manual activities, some things like reworks, non-conforming decisions or non-conforming processes, process deviations and variants. So understand what those are, put in corrective measures around those, and prioritize how you're going to implement those and when you are. And then things like eliminate manual documentation. Those are just a few of many examples of the benefits that you can see from this idea of a digital twin. So if I look at it from a life cycle perspective, right? So being able to start, we talked about things, the data collection part. So there's a data element to it. I got to get the data out of those log files. I got to make sure that it's cleansed, and you can correlate that then with other applications that you may involve in mine together. You want to do the process discovery for just that 2B, again, multi-level process, rule mining, and then being able to analyze the end-to-end process for improvement, which then takes you to the simulation what-if analysis to create your digital twin of your organization, which is your DTO, evaluate your what-if scenarios, generate the ROI, and then this is where it gets super exciting and powerful, not just as a problem finder, but as a problem fixer, is automate those. So being able to then integrate that with your workflow, your RPA, your decision management system, and so on, and then have it as a complete continuously monitoring system, so you can monitor it for compliance, optimization, improvement, and so on. You can also gain insights by infusing it with AI. So capture data generated by your operational systems, or apply AI and machine learning to then get the insights. And I'll show you, I'm going to talk about a customer example in just a moment on that. And then improve your business operations, and then take those back for continuous improvement, and then you get this circle. So if you look at this is where we are today. Okay, so we're looking at process mining as kind of this navigation system. So you use process mining to show where you're at, understand the route, and display impediments. I like to think about it as a GPS system for the business. And where are we going with it? It's really this idea of a vision for the future. So I want to not only be able to discover areas for opportunity, I wanted to create those automations for me. I wanted to then take and create the RPA robots. I know that's been discussed by the RPA vendors for probably 3 years. I worked at Automation Anywhere for a while. We talked about bots, creating bots, but it never really has happened, right? UiPath bought Process Gold, and they talked about it as well. It hasn't really happened, right? So we'll release our first drop of that this year, of really the mining, creating the bots themselves. We want to take and create the workflows themselves, be able to monitor it, and then suggest remediations, come up with a catalog of automations and say, here are the automations that would really work well for this process. We can rank them, we can score it, and then we can help to put those into production for you. We can also look and say, hey, we're not meeting the KPIs that we have and SLAs that we have in place. And we can then fix and do course corrections on processes in real time before you go off and miss those KPIs and SLAs. So you're looking forward, using technology and analytics to be able to do that. So that's really a combination of what we have today, what we're introducing in the short term and our long-term vision. Okay. So let me just take you through a couple real life examples. So one, Credem. Credem is a large Italian bank. So I think it's the largest bank in Italy. And what they wanted to do is to use process mining to jumpstart their digital transformation journey. So one of the things that they wanted to look at was some of their back office processes, particularly around account closure. Now, you spend a lot of money on the revenue producing side of the house, which is account opening, and you forget on the account closure, you have some KPIs, you have some fines that you pay if you don't do a lot of it correctly. And then you have opportunities to do poor governance if it's not managed appropriately. So they focused on the account closure activity, and what they found was they could reduce their costs 85%, their reduction on the lead time 30%, and the overall cost reduction 20% on the end-to-end process. So this is an area where they leveraged process mining initially for RPA. So they found that to be the low-hanging fruit. So they implemented RPA to get those benefits that I show on the screen, and then they rolled it into a bigger process automation solution, including workflow and decision management. So they've got 50 plus processes rolled out now, and they've got very large aspirations to move forward. Another example is a fashion company, Max Mara. So what they were looking to do is improve their after sales customer experience. So they get these number of customer support requests coming in. And frankly, a lot of them were falling by the wayside. They were falling between the cracks. They weren't getting addressed in a timely manner, and it was causing some customer satisfaction issues. So in this example, what they did is they used process mining to discover the overall process. They used AI to then classify those support requests. And then they used RPA and chatbot technology to answer those support requests in near real time. So you can see they're able to then leverage automation across the board, chatbots, RPA, process mining, the classification and natural language capability. Maybe you could even inject things like sentiment analysis to find out if this customer is upset. But you can see it really opens up for a lot of enhancements. So they saw some great results. In a very short period of time, they were able to see a 90% reduction in time and a 46% reduction in costs associated with this. So those are just two of many great examples that are out there. And I think the important element is process mining is a key contributor to digital transformation initiatives. So you saw this chart that Alberto put up about our overall, business, our IBM Automation Strategy and portfolio, and what we've got. It's about a $6 billion business for us. It's a tier one offering that we have. So it's getting a lot of emphasis by IBM. We've been in the business, as I mentioned before, since probably the late 80s. And we now are taking RPA and process mining, and we're spreading them across all of our Cloud Pak business automation suites, right? So whether it's Cloud Pak for business automation, which is business facing, AI ops, which is more for back-end system management, integration, which is a huge portfolio for us, and then this network automation, which is more of a vertical. We are seeing a tremendous amount of growth and value from it. So we're embedding it and spreading it across all of these domains within IBM. So I mentioned about $6 billion. We've got about 6,000, 7,000 enterprise customers in this space. So you can see it's a big emphasis and a big space for IBM, all being able to deliver both on cloud, on-prem, containers through Red Hat, OpenShift, and so on. This is just a real snapshot. I wanted to credentialize our product where we are with process mining. So I circled us in red there and blue, whether it's process mining through the Spark Matrix, whether it's digital twin of an organization solutions through a brand new Spark Matrix capability, and then you could see where we are. So we're aggressively marketing in this space. We're in the right Magic Quadrants. As a matter of fact, we're in the Magic Quadrants as a leader or one of the top leaders in everything across all the domains that we have, for example, in the business automation, whether it's workflow, decision management, content management, and so on. And I'm gonna close on this one slide. I mentioned earlier on the very first slide I opened with the amount of movement and acquisitions that's going on in this space. I started tracking it, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, and looking at the acquisitions that are going off in two hyper growth segments. One is RPA and the other is process mining. And I think this is really telling. You can see it's starting to condense here. The pluses show acquisitions. So if I look at just the blue circle, which is in the last 12 months, there have been something like 11 or 12 acquisitions in the space. I haven't seen this type of movement since the dot-com era nearly 20 years ago. So it's really a hot space, and it's really being driven by the ability to take process mining and leverage it for automation across your enterprises. Now, it's also important to note that if I was a SAP customer, or let's say a Contextor customer, and I wasn't running SAP, certainly that's looking like an SAP utility today. If I was a Blue Prism customer and I'm not in the financial services investment, which is SS&C, which is a financial services application provider, bought Blue Prism, will their investments be aligned with my needs? So it's important to understand, not only is there a lot of dynamics going here, but I need to pick a partner that's going to be there for me, that's going to be aligned with my interests, and I'm not going to be left high and dry. So a lot of customers that we talk to are looking for things like multi-vendor strategies, or people with robust suites that make the integration a lot easier, together with alignment of where they're going in their strategy. So I thought I would share this with you. And then the next thing I think we can talk through in April, see if there's any questions out there before we go to the next part.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. And reminder to everyone, please drop your questions for Dave in the chat or the Q&A box. We have a few already, but I'm sure there'll be a couple more. And luckily, the person who had asked for an explanation said that you answered his question that had come in during the last session. So that's great to hear. So the first question that I had for you is, process mining only helpful at the beginning of a company's automation journey, or can it be beneficial to implement or use continuously throughout?
Okay, so that's a great question, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, well, that's great. Can I just license process mining for a couple months? I'll do my discovery, and then I'll throw the process mining tool away. And the reality is that it's everybody, we're living in a dynamic world, so processes do change. But let's just talk about it holistically within a single process. So yes, it can greatly accelerate the process discovery part, right? So we got that. But also it can allow things like to continue to monitor for compliance, right? And where are we in the execution of those processes and process changes that we put in place? Also being able to do things like process improvement initiatives and continually analyze the process for areas of improvement and optimization. So process mining is super important. The other thing is, we used to look at processes as, and I'm going to lift up this book again, right? It was, don't automate, first you got to do all your re-engineering work. So you got to discover the process, then engineer it, make sure that the process is then perfect, and then you can do your automation. Well, that's changed. We use very agile technologies. Take advantage of that. Certainly, you want to make sure that things are kind of automated from a customer perspective and a usability perspective. But with agile technology, you can go ahead and change it. You can change the process as you're moving ahead. So the bot has to work a little bit harder because it's chasing through multiple threads where maybe you can consolidate things in the back office, take advantage of that. So process mining has a very long life in the overall cycle, life cycle of your automation programs.
Great. And Dave, someone just asked if you can repeat the name of the book that you've been referencing.
Oh God. Yeah, this is like this, talk about a dinosaur, right? Reengineering the Corporation, Michael Hammer and James Champy. I think I used to teach this at business school when I was at the Marshall School of Business at USC. And again, it's going back to the 80s, right? So this is kind of the initial, you could say the gun went off on process reengineering when this book came out. It was the Bible in process reengineering at the time.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. Next question is, can process mining be combined with something else synergistic to help me accelerate the first few steps in my automation implementation?
Yeah, so the synergistic piece is like I said, the automation side, right? So it can combine with, certainly you combine in the front end with things like ETL and maybe some integration technologies on the front end. But the real bang for the buck is being able to discover those processes and then put those into, put the automations, so being able to do the simulation, being able to do your prioritization, and then put those into production. So that the synergistic nature with things like your RPA, your process, your workflow, your rules, decision management systems, and then the data logs that they create and they throw off. So the data pools and data lakes that you have set up for being able to monitor and create the dashboards for those systems can then also be mined for continuous process improvement.
Okay, and then so after you've gone through this process mining analysis, what are some good ways to use the insights that are obtained?
Right, and that is really, so that's another word that really plays to this idea of this digital twin of an organization. So DTO, being able to prioritize, do your simulation, understand the value. I know in a lot of re-engineering initiatives, it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So, Joe is saying that his process makes his customers unhappy. And it's super important that we automate his, and we got to go and prioritize that. When you do the simulation, you do the analysis, and you do the numbers, you can find out where the real ROI is. And Joe, you are absolutely right. That's causing a lot of cost, and it's causing a lot of customer sat issues. Or you could say, sorry, Joe, but it's really difficult for you. But I think our priorities for the very first automation is going to be in a different area. And this is where you are on the pecking order. So it allows you to have really data-driven insight into your automation and digital transformation journeys.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And any other questions that anyone has for Dave, just a reminder, in about 25 minutes, we'll have our Meet the Speaker session. And I think, Dave, you're going to queue us up for your colleague coming up next.
Absolutely. So there's the what, and then there's the so what. So you could say that I teed it up with some presentations, some of the descriptions from a PowerPoint perspective. I'm going to ask Joel to maybe make it live, make it real for those of us that are on. Joel is our North America tech sales lead, specifically on the process mining technology, but he also has a lot of experience and synergy with the other products that I've mentioned as well. So Joel comes from us from the fine state of Minnesota. So Joel, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, Dave. You always make it easier for me by setting it up. So yeah, I'm going to spend probably the next 20, 25 minutes just going through a demo of the product. Let me pull up my screen here so everybody can see what we're talking about with the process mining tool. As Dave explained, we're trying to get insights into how our processes are actually working. We do that by, looking at log files, to visualize the process at a minimum. You may want to, you want to look at, a unique ID a timestamp, an activity, a resource. But with just that small amount of information from your log files, you can visualize how your processes are working. You can add custom fields to it, to do deeper analysis. So you can really build what you want to look at and what you want to visualize. What I thought I'd share today is just a common process that we see in every organization if we look at a procurement process or a procure-to-pay process. But we've loaded the log files, for this particular view, and what you're seeing on the screen is a visualization of now looking at our process, not a sub-process, but we're looking at the full end-to-end process. This particular example, crosses over multiple data sources. This one was using SAP, Coupa, I believe OpenText as well too. So, many companies, don't have a single source system. They're looking at multiple, and we're able to combine those together to give an end-to-end view of it. So what you're seeing on the screen is we represent the activities in the process in the rectangular boxes. And then obviously our flows, of where we're going from step to step. The darker the box that you see is the more frequent of an activity, and then lighter colors represent least frequent activities or flows as well too. So right out of the box, with no customization, we can quickly visualize our process. We can see which activities do we do more commonly. And I did say procure to pay, but actually what I'm showing you is the example that Dave went through on the Credum use case. So this is an account closure process. And the unique thing about this use case is that the customer really wanted to see where were we spending our time and our cost associated to closing out these accounts. And then the second thing they really wanted to see is a compliance issue. They knew they needed to complete these use cases or these closures within 12 days due to regulation, and they knew they weren't meeting it. Didn't really know where to start on this. So again, by looking at this process from end to end, we can see the activity steps, but we have additional tools to analyze this and help find the bottlenecks so that we can take action on it much quicker. One of the things we like to do is look at our flows, the different flows and frequencies of these flows, so we can quickly analyze and say, we know 37% or a little more than 37% of our cases are following this exact process steps associated with. So we have a request that's created. There's no registered letter associated with it, and then we begin a series of closures for the account, whether it's through the network or in the back office, or if there is a pending request for reservation that needs to be closed, and we can see those activity steps. But we can even see in the first flow, our most frequent flow that we have here, our compliance issues, we need to close this within 12 days. Right now, it's taking us over 20 days, so we're not in compliance. Even if we look at our second most frequent path that we follow, it's taking us 19 days. In fact, if we scroll through and look at even down to the smaller percentages, very few of these will find that we're meeting the 12-day requirement. So we can quickly visualize flows using process mining to understand our top priorities, where we can focus our energies, as well as bottlenecks within the process as well too. The other thing that we can look at is, Dave talked a lot about, our as-is model. Sometimes we document a as-is model of how we think a process is working, but you really need a data-driven approach to look at how it's actually performing in your production environment. So we can compare those two things together. We can use a reference model of how you think your process is occurring today, and we can compare that to the data-driven approach. And when we do that, we can see an intersection within that process of any steps that we're doing that is not part of our as-is model. So as we can see down here marked in red, we have two additional steps that we're actually doing in our data-driven approach that we don't anticipate as being activity steps. Both of these are around making adjustments either for acquittance of errors or a back office adjustment that needs to be made. We can see the impact of that as well too. Of our total amount of cases that we're looking at here, a little over 88,000 cases, almost 22,000 of those cases aren't compliant with how we think the process is happening today. So again, this is an insight that's very valuable when we're looking at, how our processes are actually working, or how do we want to make changes to make sure that we're compliant with in the process. And we can also see here from a time or cost perspective, when we are compliant, it takes us significantly less time, almost 8 days less time than when we're non-conformant with that process. We can drill down to individual use cases. We can look at things like Dave mentioned around what are the business rules that are driving that, what's causing that particular activity, and how we can resolve that. And that gives us better insights on how we might want to resolve this as well too. Okay. So instead of this time and looking at either the flows or looking at a reference model, we have other tools to do analysis as well too. So instead of looking at frequency, maybe I might want to look at reworks. How many of these activities do we have to rework because we don't get the information right the first time? There's an exception. It has to go back. We know this causes labor increases as well too, and we can quickly identify that our longest activity here when it comes to reworks is our back office service closure. We can see that we've got over 6,000 cases, and on average, we're doing about 2.3 reworks per use case. Maybe I want to look at this from maybe a different view. Let's look at duration. I can see which activity steps are taking us the longest. And again, we have many that are long, but we can see that back office service closure in this process, this end-to-end process, is taking us over 55 hours to complete. Maybe I want to overlay KPIs on it as well too, and set my thresholds for how long a particular process should work or should not work to help me identify where my opportunities are. And again, back office service closure is in the red, is outside of our parameters. We've also got pending liquidation requests is starting to become an issue. So we can quickly identify using different types of tools to analyze where a particular problem in a process is and identify it quickly as well too. In addition to visualizing the process, Dave talked about speeding up our capabilities to document the process as well too. So we document these processes using standard BPMN notation mapping, so that you can create your processes, whether it's the back office service closure end to end, or if I wanted to filter this and only look by a particular branch, or look by a particular geographic area. Whatever I want to filter, I can look and create mapping for that particular activity, and then this can be exported and used in your modeling notation, or it could be used into your business conversations as well too. So we can go from a modeling perspective to a mapping perspective to show this. The other thing that Dave talked about as well too is not only do when we create this digital twin, are we using log events, but if we need to understand what's going on at the desktop level in more detail, we can also use a tool called task mining as well too to discover a particular process. So I'm going to focus in for this example. We talked about back office service closure, but I want to know more than what the log files present me here, and understand what's really going on in this particular activity. So what I can do is I can see who is performing this work. I can understand if it's a group, or if it's a particular individual, what's their frequency and time that they're spending it on their average throughputs. We can deploy task mining to record those users and understand what they're doing. And then we can present it really into a single flow or pane of glass, so that we can drill down from this particular activity into task mining. Can also run it as a standalone process as well too, but for this example, we're using it as a drill down. So now I can go into task mining and look at the individual level and see how we're doing this back office service closure. I have the same tools that I had before, and then I can do different flows or analysis. I can look at frequency, I can look at duration times, I can look at reworks if I have any reworks within it as well too. I can look at my most common flows. In this case, it's 100%, but if there were different flows on it, I would have different views, or I can compare it to a reference model as well too. So we can drill down and see at the task level when we're looking at this concept of a digital twin, not only from the log files, but also from the desktop level, and combine those two together. So you can really document any process, analyze any process that you're looking at. The next thing I want to share is how we create analytic views, right? So we can create dashboards so that I can look at a particular process. I'm going to show a couple different examples of dashboards. This one on the account closure and what I was trying to accomplish. But these are no-code dashboards that it's really a widget-driven tool that you can create whatever views that you want to see that maybe you would present for someone on your business team that could analyze a particular process. We talked about why would you want to continually look at process mining and add more events, is because I may want to predict maybe late running cases that are out there, and I want to expose that to somebody within my organization so that they can take action on it. What we're looking at in this particular view, or this dashboard that we've created, is we're analyzing the task mining results that we're seeing. And what I really was interested in seeing here is I want to know how much time I actually spend on this task versus how much time do I spend idle, maybe doing nothing. Maybe I'm on a break, or maybe I just don't have any work queued up at this particular time, or time that I'm spending on other tasks. Why this becomes important for me, and this goes back to simulation and using an accurate digital twin of your organization, is that when I simulate, maybe I'm going to use RPA to solve a particular problem here, is I want to be able to use the actual productivity time, or the productive time that I actually used on this task. I don't want to use an estimation. I want to use the actual time so that I can generate a real ROI once I make a change, let's say with RPA or workflow, to solve this particular issue. So we can create different analytic views of this. I can also look at, instead of the banking account closure, is maybe let's look at it from a procure to pay perspective. Maybe I want to look at deviations to cost. So when we're looking at anytime that we make a change in the organization, how many events occurred, what was my cost associated with that. Maybe I want to look at spend under management. Maybe I want to evaluate suppliers, and am I paying them late or am I paying them early? Which suppliers fall into those particular categories? But we have a lot of flexibility in creating these dashboards so that you can create specific views to what you want to look at. I'm going to go back to process mining here. And we'll go back to a particular example that I want to show you around account closure and simulation, is that as Dave mentioned, understanding your digital twin, having the accuracy of that, but the ability to create what if scenarios and simulate outcomes helps us prioritize which projects matter and what my ROI that I'll receive on that as well too. So we can create any scenario. If I want to look at part of the process, if I want to look at the end-to-end process, which I'm doing right now, we can create simulations of those particular scenarios. So I'll create a simulation test here. And this allows us to go into our simulation tool. With our simulation tool, we can look at what the current lead time, the estimated lead time and cost, and you can see that these are static. We'll change that once we do simulation to it. I can look at how many instances that I want to test out my scenario. Maybe I want to do the whole 88,000 events, or maybe I want to do some smaller subset of that and look at what the impact is. I'm just going to set a smaller subset of this right now. I can change the way that I look at this in minutes. I can change, start dates, end dates. I may want to look at historically, only comparing the simulation against a certain time period, maybe a particular quarter or a month that we know that we're particularly busy with account closures or in procurement, where we have a higher rate of requisitions during that particular time. But I can go down to any of the individual activities and look at making changes to it. You can see that I'm pulling in the staffing that I have available for these particular areas. If I look at back office service closure, which we identified as a problem, I could simply, with process mining, we've talked a lot about for automation, which is very powerful. But sometimes we may just want to make a better execution, right? So if, what would be the impact if my current staffing, instead of doing the back office service closure in 2 days and 7 minutes, what if we changed the service time and through some training, and we thought we could improve that by, 2 hours? What if we can improve that by a day? Or maybe I simply want to make a staffing change to that. Or, what if I wanted to change the scheduling for this particular group that's doing this? Or I can look at automation, right? So what would happen if we were to, address this issue using automation, and we added 2 robots to do this, and we believe that the service time is going to be 3 minutes, and see the impact of it. Now I can run a simulation of this. And then with my simulation, then I can compare really my A to B result. I can look at, the as is, how it is today. I can create a simulation of that and see what the impact of that is. And then I can create really scenarios that can see what the impact to the changes are here. So you can see by simply making a change on 200 cases, I can see that, my impact to the lead time versus being 20 days is 16 days. I can see that my cost being 18 is now driven down to 17. The total case cost in this particular scenario would need to do a 1-to-1 case count to case count to show what the difference in cost, but I can see what my average case cost is, or my cost running 200. I can look at, the deltas between the two, between the case duration and case counts, and see the impact over time during that period. I can see the impact to the performance of the activity, and I can see the impact here. If I blow this up a little bit, I can see the impact of service closure going down to 14 hours and making an impact in that, where before it was taking us 55 hours by adding automation to this, in this case, RPA automation, but it could be workflow automation as well too. So simulation, it gives us the ability then to create scenarios where we can develop our ROI, our expectation. We can measure those as we go forward with process mining to see that the changes that we're putting into effect actually are getting us to our ROI as well too. But this helps us prioritize between different use cases, leveraging process mining to this. So I'm going to wrap up there for any questions, but that's just a short demo of the product that I wanted to show you some of the capabilities and how we're using process mining to leverage opportunities for automation. So insights to action. Right, I'll pass it back.
Great, Joel. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we are going to move now into our Meet the Speaker session. So any remaining questions that you have for all 3 of our presenters today, anything we didn't get to cover, we invite you to bring with you there. We will be dropping the link into the chat function. So you can either go through the platform or you can just go click directly into that link, and we will see you there in a few minutes. Thank you.